In the agenda, so again, we're going to talk a lot about monitoring, surveillance systems, but we'll also talk about some update on cost of PRRS in the U.S., a study from Darrell, and a couple exciting SHIC-funded projects. So for the first part on detection, on PRRS detection, it's important to remember that every time we are monitoring, the monitoring systems, they are not perfect. They do not have, will never have 100% specificity or sensitivity, and that's because we're sampling always a subset of the population, and the diagnostic tests are, of course, not perfect. The stuff that we like to pay close attention to understand when we're implementing monitoring systems are three things. First one, time to detect. What's the desired time? How soon do we want to detect the disease at the population? And that has a lot to do with the frequency of test. If it's important to detect right away, you just have to sample more frequently. Also, understand the limit of detection at a population level, which has to do with your herd sensitivity. The more you want to lower that bar of threshold of disease detection, the more pigs you have to sample, or the more pigs you have to be represented in your sample. And also important to understand the false alarm rate, which has to do with specificity of your method. And we're going to talk about those concepts as we move forward. And of course, an optimal monitoring surveillance system has to be fast, practical, affordable, but also effective. Something that we've been observing in the swine industry is that we've been, if you look at the past 5 or more years, have been moving from really focus on just individual sampling of individual pigs and incorporating some population-based sampling and monitoring, in great part because of the influence and the great work that Jeff Zimmerman has done with the development of oral fluids, and now with the development of processing fluid. Carlos just talked a little bit about that. We have something to share on that too. And just because pig farms are actually populations of animals, it makes sense to sample, work with those population-based samples to get a better understanding on what's going on in the population. And not surprisingly, since we're sampling more animals with the population-based samples, every time we look at the herd sensitivity, it's not only more practical and cheaper, but it's actually better in terms of herd sensitivity as compared to individual samples. In most part, because every time you deal with individual samples, you just deal with limited number of samples, not in the hundreds of pigs, right? Also, before sharing the results, just this last slide on the few assumptions that the industry has made for disease monitoring the last years, and three main assumptions that we think it's an opportunity to revisit about those assumptions. The first one was that the due to wean piglet population, or the population of pigs that are about to wean, about 21 days or so, they truly reflect the breeding herd status. Also, that PRRS dies out after 90 days at the prevalence below 10%. That's what the sampling of monitoring 30 piglets in a monthly basis, that what it assumes, that PRRS dies out after 90 days at 10% prevalence in due to wean. And also, another assumption is that PRRS is randomly distributed in the barn, right? More specifically in the due to wean pig population. So we have enough evidence and field. I'm sure that you have examples too out in the barn where there is failure to detect virus in the due to wean pig population, but the virus is still in individual sows that for some reason they shed virus for longer. So not always. Sometimes there are situations where the virus is in the herd, but just not in the due to wean piglets that you are sampling. Also, we have plenty of data to show that, to support that the PRRS does not die out after 90 days below 10% prevalence. PRRS can sustain a low prevalence scenario. Carlos just showed some more data on that, right? PRRS does circulate at 2–3%, sometimes lower than that for quite a long time, so we need to revisit that. And PRRS is not randomly distributed, especially when at low prevalence. PRRS is clustered in a few litters or a few pockets in the farm, and we're going to show some results. So 30 piglets or 60 or even 90 in a monthly basis is just not good enough to detect the virus at the herd. We need more than that. And so the question is, how do you actually improve the PRRS monitoring? How do you increase the number of pigs? And how do you increase the frequency of testing in a practical, affordable, and reliable way? That's a question. And so we're going to talk about three approaches on that question. The first one is processing fluids. Carlos did a great, already showed some great data on that. We have a few here to show too. I'm showing here a picture of Will Lopez, who is working on his PhD with us. And he has been also working on processing fluids, described or defined as the exudate from the process of tail docking and castration from those piglets. And the ones that we've been working on there are about piglets of about 3 to 4 to 5 days. We call them neonate, but they're actually 3, 4, 5 days old. So I'm going to share some slides here on processing fluids. I'd like to thank immensely the contributions of other people, especially Dr. Jose Angulo, also with his contributions on those studies. Also Eva Jablonski, the National Pork Board Committee, a group of veterinarians, Sipo Yeski here. He's one of our kind of partners on some of those results, and also some internal collaborators at Iowa State. You see here people from the molecular lab, and also more specifically in the serology side of the developments, Luis Jimenez Lirola. So processing, our study design was a little bit different from Carlos. Carlos compared processing fluid results at the liter basis, and here we went to different farms and collected processing fluids from all the piglets that were being processed in that farrowing house. So covering a few hundred piglets. I'm going to show some numbers later, but all the piglets that were being processed at that farrowing house, and we went. In the same day that pigs were processed, we collected 30 blood samples from the same pig population, just selected 30 piglets and run the samples by PCR. And here are the results from the first 10, what we call the matching sets, or sets between processing fluids, and 30 blood results, or serum results, right? And briefly, all those herds tested, all those samples, processing fluid samples tested positive, and on the serum side, we collected 30, pulled them by fives, and tested, so 6 PCRs for the blood samples. And as you can see in the table, most of the samples were most of the situations, there were 1 or 2 positive serum samples, but there are a couple situations. Oh, sorry, I was the wrong slide. Here we go. So there were a couple situations where the sample tested, the processing fluid sample tested positive, but the virus was not detected in the 30 samples in the processing fluids. Let's look now at the same results, and I'm going to expand to 20 more samples, to 20 more matching sets, and let's look at the CT values. So the colors represent the PCR result, red meaning positive and green meaning negative, and the numbers represent the CT values. And as you can see, again, is that processing, every time that there was at least one piglet positive in the serum samples, the processing fluid also tested positive, and there were a few situations where the serum tested negative and the processing fluid still tested positive. So as a summary here for this table, about 18% of serum tested positive and most processing fluid tested negative, with the exception of those here, the last ones where the farm appeared to be producing negative pigs at the processing time. Just a table showing some numbers from volume of processing fluids that we've been obtaining with this approach. Pigs in the sample, so again, looking at a few hundred piglets in the processing fluids, collecting processing fluids again from all the piglets that have been processed in the farrowing room that day. And if you divide the total volume by the number of piglets, you get that we've been getting about 2 mLs of processing fluids per liter as an average, or about 180 microliters per pig. We also detected in processing fluids, if you want results we can discuss later, but we've been also detecting anti-PRRS antibodies in processing fluids. And Luis has been working to further develop the kits to detect not only to detect some specific isotypes, detect specifically IgA, IgM, a combination of those, and or IgG separately. That's a work in progress. We've also, just like Carly's reported, processing fluids seem to be a pretty decent sample in terms of our RNA integrity. We've been having quite a good success rate in sequencing our 5 out of processing fluid sample. And we are also implementing PCV2 testing, testing by PCR in those processing fluids, and looking for how does that correlate with downstream performance. This is how we've been kind of suggesting people to collect processing fluids. Is basically get a bucket, right? A bucket, put a disposable plastic bag in that, and then put a cheesecloth or any other net, secure that with a rubber band, and then you start processing pigs, start throwing your nuts and tails in the bucket, and then when you're done, just squeeze a little bit, and just to get the fluid, the exudate drips to the plastic bag, and then you transfer to the tube, identify with the date, how many pigs, whatever else it's important, and send that back to the lab. We've also been working with different herds using processing fluids to monitor those herds over time, and this is an aggregated or consolidated results from a little over 30 herds, and that have been collecting processing fluids on a daily, sometimes on a weekly basis. And we were interested to start understanding how long does it take to start testing negative consistently on processing fluids. And this chart shows the time to reach 3 consecutive negative results in processing fluids. And a way to summarize that is by looking at the 5th percentile, which is the median time. The median time has been about 28 weeks, and the 25th and 75th percentile being 26 and 31 weeks respectively. So at least to our, we expected to see at least some 15 weeks sooner than what we are seeing, based on previous time to stability results studies with the dual-twin piglets. At processing time, we thought they're going to start testing negative by week 10 or 12 or by week 15 or so, and we were wrong. And then talking with different vets, different systems, it seems like this number is being pretty consistent across the systems, this number. And we believe that the reason why it's a delayed time to start testing negative on processing fluid is just because we're looking for way more samples. Right? We're going from 30 or 60 piglets every month or every couple of weeks to hundreds of piglets, and a lot of times every day. So it's way more representative sample with a powerful sample, and with PCI is very, very sensitive, and so we're being able to detect the virus more efficiently. So we talked about obtaining processing fluid. It's kind of easy and practical using the approach that it was described, whole room level up to 720 piglets. PRRS detection in processing fluid is superior to matching 30 sera. We are also conducting a study where we are collecting whole blood samples from all the piglets in the whole room and comparing to the processing fluids to better understand the limit of detection. Some work similar to what Carlos is doing. And OR5 and antibodies were also detected. In the longitudinal sampling, we observed that the first negative test started at about 16 weeks, but it took an average time of 28 weeks to get at least 3 consecutive tests, right? And so we are going to continue to optimize the molecular and serologic methods to this sample type. All right, so processing fluid seems like it's a very good sample type and approach to screen and start monitoring herds and looking at the status of piglets at that 3, 4, 5 days age, but we still need to understand what's the status of pigs at weaning, right? You still need to make vaccination decisions, pig flow mixing, commingling decisions, and so we still need to understand what's the status of piglets at weaning, due to wean piglets. So this study is a study is still in progress by Marcelo Almeida, also a PhD student working with us, and this work was a BI Research Award from the Advanced Research on Respiratory Diseases couple from last year. So this is a picture of litter sampling. And you see here there are 2 litters side by side, 1 rope with it's pretty much pigs interacted with the rope. They chewed on the rope and contributed with saliva. This other sample, this other rope, pigs look at it but don't interact, don't chew on it. And on our hands, the litter, obtaining oral fluids from suckling pigs is just, it's a hard work. You can try different stuff. We tried different substrates, a lot of different factors. The truth is that at least in our hands, it has a poor reproducibility. It's hard to obtain those fluids on a consistent way. But Lisa Yeski reported a few years ago what she called as family oral fluids. And on our hands too, we're being excited about and testing that. In our hands, on the hands of the vets producers that we're working with, the success rate is pretty high, and it's amazing. You walk to the barn, as soon as you put the rope there, the sows start playing with that, and as soon as the sows start playing with the rope, the baby piglets copy their mom and start playing with the rope as well. And so that's the family oral fluid picture. And so our question is, all right, you have this family oral fluid where there's oral fluid from the sow and from the piglet. How good is that to detect the virus at the due to wean piglet population, right? So we conducted this study where we collected 72 matching sets of family oral fluids and sera from all the piglets in the litter. So we hanged 72 times, we hanged the family oral fluid rope, and we collected blood from all the piglets in the litter. We tested all for PCR, and we were interested on the probability of detecting the virus in family oral fluid compared to that of detecting in the serum. And here are some of the results. There's 3, it's kind of busy slide, so we put that, showing here just 3 rooms. And what you see here, so let's focus on this room for now. Each square is a litter, and each rectangle is a litter, and each little square is a piglet. Blue means tested negative, red means tested positive, right? So here, in this example, for example, this liter here, the rectangle is red, showing that the family oral fluid tested positive, and there was, from the 10 piglets in the liter, 1 tested positive only, right? And here, this other example, 1 piglet positive in the liter, family oral fluids tested negative, and so on. So you can appreciate a few things here. Those rooms, they were side by side in the same farm. You can appreciate the difference in the prevalence, piglet level prevalence going from 6% to almost 60%, the liter level going from 19% to 80%, right? And so pretty variable, again, same farm, same day, just different rooms. And other thing that I would like to highlight was that in this room here, for example, from the samples we took, there were 13 red squares, 13 piglets that were positive. They were not randomly distributed in the room. And same thing you can observe here. They were, the positive pigs were kind of clustered in a few liters. And that has important implications, not only for family oral fluid or any other population type sampling, but also for individual blood, individual pig-based sampling. So not randomly distributed. And here is a graph summarizing all those squares and rectangles. It shows the probability to detect PRRS in family oral fluids as a function of number of pigs that were positive in the liter, from 0 pigs positive all the way to 12 piglets positive. And to simplify a little bit more, here's a table showing the number of viremic pigs in the liter. When there was no piglet viremic in the liter, the family oral fluid also, it never tested positive. So at least in those situations, there was no issue with environmental contamination or false positive results. Specificity was 100%. When there was 1 or 2 piglets viremic in the liter, there was a 50% change, so sensitivity of about 50% in that case. And when there is more, 3 or more piglets positive in the liter, the family oral fluids was positive all the time. How do we put that together? Right, the very next step is how many oral fluids do I need, family oral fluids do I need to detect PRRS in the farrowing room? Before you ask me, I don't know. So we are still working on that. Hopefully next time we meet, we will have some guidelines for as far as number of samples that are testing. The vets we are working on, they're collecting 10 oral fluids, about 10 oral fluids in the farrowing house. So how do you put processing fluids and family oral fluids together? If we think about a herd that's undergoing elimination, first thing's going to happen is you start seeing piglets negative at birth, and then they have to remain negative at weaning. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but that's what we want to do. So if you have your monitoring focus on weaning pigs only, at some point in the farm broke at some point, and you're undergoing elimination, at some point you start producing truly negative pigs. But if you went back and screen your herds with the processing fluids, you can also detect when you started producing negative pigs at birth, and then do whatever you can in terms of management practices to avoid that lateral transmission and keep the pigs negative at weaning. So it's a big opportunity, and you can only detect this window, which is, of course, herd-specific, farm-specific, outbreak-specific. There's no rule for that. You've got to measure each herd, and a way to do that is with processing fluids. Start screening for processing fluids. Once you start detecting negative results, then good opportunity to start checking the due-to-wean piglets. One last piece here on the monitoring side of breeding herds. I'm going to share this result on ongoing automated production data screening for PRRS detection. This is a study we did with the Schwartz farms, with 14 herds and about 50,000 sows. And what you see here, we gathered production records for over 2 years period of time on a weekly basis. And what you see here is aborts over time, and the blue bar is the confidence, the control limits. And here is, you're looking at a statistical process control or SPC chart. And so every time the smooth or the average line crosses the threshold, that means it's a significant deviation of aborts. And we did that for a few other parameters. And we also collected the shrimp status for PRRS and PD. So those lines here represents the change in PRRS, the PRRS status. Our question for that study was, how does the change, the signals in production data correlated with the reported outbreaks for the swine health monitoring project, right? In other words, if I monitored production data only, how many times would I have been able to detect the outbreaks? And so, here's showing results for aborts and pre-weaning mortality. As a summary, all the times that the system had an outbreak, 10 times, there was a significant spike in aborts and there was a significant spike in mortality. So it was possible to detect all of those retrospectively. And it's important to say that there are some false alarms. So throughout 2 years, there were 7 false alarms, so 3 or 4 per year for aborts and a little less for pre-weaning mortality. Signals that were not attributed or related to a change in PRRS status. And we said, all right, you can detect. And then the next question is, how soon or how late can you detect as compared to the date or the week that the system reported the outbreak to the Swine Health Monitoring Project? And if you look at the pre-weaning mortality, the time to detect was 0 compared to the day that it was reported, meaning that a lot of times they use pre-weaning mortality as an indicator for PRRS, they further investigated, confirmed infection and reported to M-shrimp. For aborts, however, results were more interesting here in the sense that in a lot of times, the time to detect was 2 to 4 weeks before they reported the change to the Swine Health Monitoring Project. So there was a detectable spike or signal in aborts 2, 3, 4 weeks before, at least in this herd, in this situation here, before the outbreak was reported to M-shrimp, which make us think that why not? So this screening production data may be a good supplement to your existing diagnostic monitoring, and why not establish an ongoing automated way to screen production data with SPC on production farms. And that's exactly what we are doing. Just developed a web tool here where it's farm-specific. There's a farm-specific login and password with the data encryption and everything. The data is uploaded to the ISU server, so it has the same kind of level security level that the VDL and other services have. What the user does is logs in and enters information on selected parameters, and then this goes to the server. The server automatically is screening for new data. When it finds new data, it runs those charts in the background, and whenever there is a signal, it shoots an automated email notification to the participant, say, hey, Houston, you may have a problem, so you better go and investigate and rule in or rule out whatever disease of concern. Just another screen of the data. The web page is mobile friendly, so it automatically adjusts to the screen. Just showing here you enter the date, number of aborts, pre-weaning mortality, prenatal mortality, which is just a sum of stillbirths and mummies. And we are also collecting data on sows, number of sows of feed in the gestation barn, and better understand how do those correlate with the outbreaks. And then once the user clicks on submit, there is a verification screen. You can either modify or submit. And then again, when there is a signal, you will receive, the user will receive an email from the server with a chart showing, hey, this is what happens with your aborts or of sows of feed or other parameter. So for this part, the kind of evolution of monitoring surveillance system consists of population-based samples. They are more practical, they are easier, they are cheaper, and they do have better performance compared to conventional sampling. Not saying that we don't ever need to bleed pigs again, but at least for monitoring and for screening herds, you don't really have to. And those monitoring surveillance systems, we presented here three tools: processing fluids for neonates, family oral fluids for due to wean, SPC for early signs of disease, and of course, you'd mix and match those based on your specific questions, your specific farm or situation. Going to the growing finishing side, there's this question that has been out there for a long time: how many oral fluids do I need to detect PRRS in growing finishing pigs? And Marisa Rotolo just finished her PhD, defended her PhD a couple of weeks ago with Jeff Zimmerman, and to tackle that specific question. And her paper is available, all her work is already published and available for consultation in peer-reviewed in the vet microbiology. And they went further and they developed a video. It's a 9-minute video, which is available to you all. I encourage you guys to click in log into the, not log in, just visit the Iowa State Veterinary Diagnostic Lab website. There we'll have this picture here. And just click on that picture, and it will open a YouTube video put together by SMAC, with the Swine Medicine Education Center. It's a 9-minute video on those specific questions. How do I allocate my ropes in the barn? What's the frequency of sample collection and sample size per barn or per site when you have multiple barns per site? And how do those interaction of those two influence your probability to detect PRRS in those oral fluids? This is just an example of one chart that they explore and shows, again, the probability to find the virus based on how many oral fluids you work and what's the frequency of sampling. And also there are, as I said, formulas where you can plug and play and tables your own question, and also look at the effect of, I have these multiple barns on the site, how do I sample them effectively to detect the disease? So I encourage you to go and watch the video. Couple more things to talk about here. Those slides are from Daryl Holtkamp. He's a PI on this project. It's a chic initiative on rapid response to emerging disease. And what it consists of standardizing the way to conduct outbreak investigations and the way to report the findings from outbreak investigations in case of emerging diseases. And it's important to standardize, because if I do an outbreak investigation, or Cesar does an outbreak investigation, or Paul does an outbreak investigation, later on we can now, if we use the same tool, the same method, now we can compare results, we can benchmark results, we can do further analysis. So it's really important to seek for consistency in those outbreak investigations going forward. And so the team put together standardized surveys or tools to conduct outbreak investigations. and also suggested kind of reports on how to summarize the findings. And how does it work? It works in a regional approach. So the U.S. was divided in 6 regions. As of now, there are 26 members, what they call the Rapid Response Corps members, or those are vets. Those are people that are willing to travel in a short notice, 48 to 72 hours, and be on site in their specific region to conduct the outbreak investigation using some of these tools. And still need members for regions 1, 2, 4, and 6. And there is, SHIC does have budget to compensate the time for rapid response members. So if you're interested, there's this opportunity. So, and in the SHIC website, there are modules, online modules, the training, the orientations on how to use the tools and proposed approaches to conduct the outbreak investigations. Just go through those modules online. And online there is also availability of several tools that may be a good resource for the outbreak investigations. So to learn more, just contact Daryl or visit the SHIC website. Monitoring and updating the value of productivity losses due to PRRS. National Pork Board had the mission or the goal to reduce the cost of PRRS by 20% by 2020 compared to the 2010 study that Daryl conducted. And so this study was to provide updates a couple of times a year on how we are getting to that target. So we'll be reporting 5 years moving average. So those studies, they only consider the value of lost productivity and not other costs such as treatment costs or changes in supply or changes in markets. So the value of the value of productivity losses due to PRRS has declined since the last study, which is the baseline for the National Pork Board goal, right? Going from 664 million to 638. And if we adjust for price changes and national herd size, the drop is even more significant. We're going to talk about that right now. To better understand why the cost is going up or down, Daryl's model included 4 different components. The herd distribution, which is pretty much a proportion of herds in the U.S. that belong to one of the 4 categories or status, and we've been using the swine health monitoring data to assess that. It also has the productivity parameter, which is basically a comparison of changes in productivity of affected herds compared to unaffected herds, prices and costs, and national herd inventory. So this is the swine health monitoring data from the SHIC project. I've been in collaboration with Bob and Carlos, and look forward to keep interacting with Carlos and Cesar. What I want to show here is that compared to 2010, today there are less herds that were categorized as negative for PRRS, and that has reflected here in this parameter of herd distribution. If you look at this and this only, the cost of PRRS would have increased since 2010, just because there is less herds that are negative now compared to back then. And same thing as the national herd inventory and prices and costs. It has gone up, both of them. But the productivity losses in affected herds compared to negative herds has decreased. And because of that, and that explains why we're actually making progress. So this is, again, the 2010 baseline, 664, and this is what Harold calls the adjusted estimate, which has decreased 83 million, right? Not considering the changes in price, cost, and national herd inventory. If you fix those, this is where we are compared to 2010, the 2010 study. So the goal to 2020 is to reduce by 20%, which means reduce 133 million, and we are at this point at 62% progress, still have some homework to do. All this project, all the progress, as we talked about, it was due to reduction in productivity losses in affected herds relative to unaffected herds, and that's just a speculation, but we believe that it has to do with the shift from LVI to vaccine in breeding herds, as well as improvements in biomanagement practices. So thanks again to the University of Minnesota team for the collaboration in this study. Looking forward to keep interacting with you guys. All right, the last piece of information I wanted to share is this is a picture of Giovanni Trevisan. He's also a graduate student working with us on this chic project to develop a swine disease reporting system using VDL data. So all the work that Roger Main has been working very hard in the last couple of years on the data standardization effort across the labs, which is pretty much creating ways to have the labs to consolidate, unify the languages and consolidate their diagnostic terms. And as they are making progress, this is an example of what we can do with that data. Put that data together in a portal and give the results back to the swine industry. So the project consists of gathering, aggregating data, preserving of course, the confidentiality, everything being reported at the state level, and digest, report, and share what we're seeing in the VDL data. So some of the things that are important, what are people testing for, right? That we'll be able to document that. What are they finding? How does that change over time, region, age group, specimen, that kind of thing. And we're also working and looking forward to incorporate this data in the MSHIMP kind of big portal or database. This is just one screenshot of one chart that's available online. We're using this tool called the Power BI for business intelligence, Jens. That's a Microsoft tool for this kind of thing. And what you see here is the total number of cases. This is Iowa State data only at this point. As we speak, we're working with the Minnesota VDL team, with Jerry Torreson, with Mary and the team to incorporate their data here. You see here number of cases over time. Each bucket here is a season, right? And this is by the case level. So green means the case, all samples in the case tested negative. Red tested positive, and you see the changes over time. And we also have some filters here. And in this chart here, I'm filtered out results from boar stud, looking at only other age groups or farm types. Right? Can also filter for some other stuff, including purse type, side state, specimen, that kind of stuff. If you focus on the positive results only, this is the seasonal pattern you see over time. Here I filtered the cases with tissues, only the cases with some tissue present in the submission. You can also see the RFLPs over time or by state. So again, with filters, and then the user would plug and play and see what he or she is interested. Also have map densities on the cases, RFLPs, diversity in a map. So people could filter, again, and go specifically what they're looking for. This is a pie chart looking at the RFLP types. And here is an effort to get this same data and look at the weekly basis and start looking at significant deviations from normal, as Cesar said before, detecting significant increases of number of negative results or positive results for specific disease. And why would that be applicable? This is just one example of the TGE data. We completed that for PRRS, PED, TGE, and Delta Corona at this point. And as you can see, the TGE submissions over time until 2013. In 2013, there was a spike that coincides with the PED. People were looking for TGE and not finding. As you can see, the red bars reduced. And if you look at the positive results, only TGE over time, you see there was a seasonal pattern of PED being detected every winter or spring. And since 2014, we're not detecting that. Labs are not picking up those positive results anymore, right? And it does not mean that people didn't test. People are still testing, same level that they were before, but not finding TGE. So all this is done with, this is just a data visualization tool that we're using to aggregate the data from the VDLs after some digesting, some aggregation, some consolidation. And if you scan this code, you'll be directed to the Power BI website, and all this information, if you have a phone or a tablet or a computer, all this will be available. So with that, I'd like to acknowledge one more time the collaborators for this study, for the studies that we showed here today. Of course, the graduate students, veterinarians and producers that have been helping a lot with those results, with those studies, funding sources from the studies we showed here today. And this is the picture again of the graduate students. Some other stuff that we're working on. We're really focused and interested on evaluation of strategies to prevent, detect, or manage swine infectious diseases under field conditions. So if you like anything of those studies, please come talk to us and be happy to talk about how to collaborate and work together.